When you think Hermes, there's probably a list of adaptations that come to mind. From the Disney's Hercules classic, to the Percy Jackson neglectful father played by Nathan Fillion or Lin-Manuel Miranda, take your pick, to the more recent musical adaptations like in Hadestown or Epic. But one characteristic tends to stay the same: he brings them messages. As such, the god's favorite messenger is here too, sporting his classic messenger bag and sending Elestrals to their grave as he treads the boundary of the afterlife. Wait, what? While most adaptations focus on the male piece, it's time to put more focus on the boundaries piece of the god of boundaries, roads, and travelers. Zeus forgive me, let's talk about the messenger. This is Dissecting Divines.
You think I dress like this because I'm a mailman? No, darling. I am an alpha mailman.
Hermes has a base cost of 1 wind and the ability to go up to 4 wind once cast, with its disenchant ability taking 2 wind to pitch any Elestral with a wind in its enchantment cost from the deck to the underworld. This immediately covers an application that most strategies cannot approach effectively: self-targeted milling. Milling as a concept has been around since Frostfall, with general milling present on Morolith, targeted milling on the opponent present on Waylance, and even to an extent self-targeted milling on cards like Paleoth. But this is a level those can't reach for combo potential thanks to being on a rune, meaning you don't need to invest your cast into it, let alone battle like Paleoth would require. Because of this, you can immediately follow up Hermes' mill with all sorts of combo potential before even getting into its built-in synergy pieces. So plays like setting up a Rise from the Ashes or targeted milling for Blistrix while you have Asprowl on the board are both options. However, the intended use case is clearly to be a toolbox divine of sorts, having a handful of Elestrals that all do something when pitched with Hermes, such as Carry-On Champ, which revives itself with a spent spirit, Carry-Off Champ, which pops an Elestral by expending the same number as the number of enchanting spirits under it, Spinosect Champ, which can nexus up to 2 wind on board, and Cockatoodle Champ, which suppresses a card for a turn. Each of these vary in usefulness, namely on the back of the counter rune Hermes' Trickery, which can pop any Elestral you control to cast a different one from the underworld with the same spirits that were under the popped one. All of these are decent effects in a vacuum, but when brought together form the backbone of the intended Hermes deck, so let's look at it now. Your standard Hermes package will generally, at a minimum, include 2 Hermes, 3 Spineth Champ, 2 Spinosect Champ, 2 Carry-On Champ, and 2 Trickery. These 11 cards are generally what I would call Hermes 101, and from this alone, there are a lot of applications. The most common play you will probably see is Spineth Champ on turn 1 to search for Hermes, the bread and butter of the deck. Having access to Hermes as soon as possible is critical, as it's what allows for most of the really funny plays that this deck can perform. If the opponent already has a setup Elestral at this point, you can also opt from this position to go for the Spineth Champ 1-card combo. Hermes for 4, Disenchant 2 to dump Spinosect Champ to Nexus 1 wind from Hermes to your Spineth Champ to disenchant the wind and ascend into Spinosect Champ from deck, and then bounce an opponent's Elestral. Absolutely incredible. 10 out of 10 play. There's just one issue with it. If you run into Gorgon's Gaze, this is the worst timeline. Investing a Hermes is already a 4-spirit investment, and nexusing the spirit to the Spineth to get met with a Gorgon's not only means that the play has been successfully interrupted, but now your Hermes can no longer be used as a follow-up play. What I standardly will do is play the Spineth to get the Hermes and then hold it in defense, waiting until either a prime opportunity or for all other options to fail. You can also just enchant for turn the wind to Spineth and do the effect, which while slower is generally how I get the effect to resolve most commonly, or the best way of all, just to send over it into the Spinosect you bricked on. Past that, your most common usage of Hermes is going to be to dump a Carry-On Champ, which can revive itself with one of the spirits you invested, effectively being a Tadpuff from deck. And thus begins the eternal question, where do we go from here? Hermes as a package is shockingly versatile for that reason, as you basically get to choose your own adventure every time you activate the Divine. We're going to put a pin in that for now though, and cover it in the next section, but in the meantime, be thinking about what you do with a Wind Tadpuff. Lastly, for the core block of cards is Hermes' Trickery, and I'll be blunt, this card is the reason that you chose to play Hermes. But Law, I chose to play the deck because of the intricacies of Carry-Off's ability to steal. No, you chose it because Trickery is the best rune in the game. Stop lying to me. By popping an Elestral you control, you get to cast another Elestral from Underworld using the same spirits that were on the destroyed one. This, as a card, changes everything about multiple points of your lines. For starters, Spinosect Champ becomes far more threatening since you can always tag it out to the one in the Underworld from going Wombo Combo earlier, netting you a 7 defense wall and another bounce. You can also use it on an Elestral you stole soul with carry off, meaning you get to keep its spirits to push advantage, and the opponent doesn't get them back at the end of the turn. You can even use it for funnier applications like dodging shield, as the opponent needs to pay into the cost of the shield before you get a chance to respond, meaning that the 3 spirits they just invested to sink your carry off have now effectively become used toilet paper, as the carry off now is a different carry off and that one still gets to punch you this turn. The biggest flaw though for the card is its intricacies around special casting in Elestral. Unless otherwise stated, a raw special cast must use the same number of spirits as that Elestral's enchantment cost, meaning that if you pop an Elestral with 2 spirits on it to float into a 1 cost, you'll only get to use one of those spirits for your float. This can always be circumvented by paying the wind spirit off your 2 cost to fuel the trickery when performing this specific maneuver, but it's still worth keeping in mind. With that said, let's dive into some applications. Okay, back to the wind tadpuff that is Carry-On Champ. Special casting a Carry-On can be used for all sorts of purposes, but the intended use was clearly to cast Carry Off, which can either come down by ascending over it to get its steal effect off, or wait until the Carry-On dies, special casting itself after the fact. The main benefit of Carry Off in this particular strategy is the fact that you can trickery away the stolen Elestral, so you can get your damage in, pop it with trickery, and maintain the spirits invested on it from your opponent to keep damaging while denying the opponent the ability to get the body back at the end of the turn. Take Ruli's top 16 list from a recent premiere as an example. Carry Off is being played here at a maximum 3 copies alongside 3 Carry-On, 3 Hermes, and 3 Trickery just to make sure you can always pull off your plays. It even is running the cards of the Hurricane Starter Pack trademark in Rabbit, Whale, Pelican, and even the optional Monsoon of Iruis to properly capitalize on the most commonly played elements of the format. However, that's not the only application of Carry-On, as with its status as a free body, you can do all sorts of things with it, most notably ascend over it into whatever you want, basically. Popular options in testing include, but are not limited to, Phallicane, Tornasian, Infornax, the Spinosect you keep bricking on, and by far the funniest option, Zephyrog. But my personal choice for an Ascension target has got to be Griffuse.
Hermes! And Zeus!
How would you feel if I told you that you could set up a Volt Tempest on the first turn without your opponent getting an opportunity to react? Starting from Hermes and Griffuse, we cast Hermes for 4 and dump Carry-On, who comes back with one of those wins. We then ascend over it into Griffuse, who can Nexus a spirit from Hermes to ascend into Volt Tempest, who can then immediately burn the opponent for 3. This 2-card combo is so shockingly easy to find and pull off in a dedicated deck, and when backed up further with a set Trickery makes removing it a pain in the rear. Up until now, most players are conditioned to always shield the Volt Tempest when it attacks, but that isn't enough anymore, as by burning yourself 4 on shield, the opponent can now just flip Trickery, paying the wind off of the Volt and tagging it back into the Griffuse that got them there in the first place, who can still swing for 2 damage. The downside to this is that by relying so heavily on Hermes for this line, there is a chance that you don't find the Zeus for the protection. Nah fam, we roll those dice. The opponent just better have found the Earthquake, because otherwise we're still gonna just burn them for 3 every turn until they do, while we stockpile more and more advantage. Here's my current personal list that I took to 2nd place at my local store regional. I too have succumbed to the curse of 5s, but the deck plays so much better for it. Now in all of this discussion so far, even when talking about Carry-Off, we have failed to discuss Carry-Off Champ, and honestly there is a reason for that. Carry-Off Champ does provide a lot of utility for the deck by effectively being another copy of Earthquake that's triggerable off of Hermes, but between the Hermes investment and the expenditure for Carry-Off Champ's effect, you're looking at an Earthquake that costs between 3 and 5 spirits. In testing, this is spoken to me more as a side deck tech than a main deck tool, unless you cater your deck around it by playing far more healing than normal. Rebellion has a take on that idea, making top 16 at a recent premiere, upping the earth count to utilize Viserys and Verdolith, the latter of whom can piggyback off the spirit investment into a Carry-Off Champ pop to immediately recover said investment. When the deck has 8 different heal cards, you are permitted to play a little bit fast and loose with your expenditures, so 2 Carry-Off Champ do fit nicely in the main here. However, if you are not building your deck with this in mind, it's best to keep 1 to 2 copies in the sideboard for matchups with hard to clear targets. Okay, let's talk Dracodoodle. Out of all of the Wave 1 Hermes cards, Dracodoodle Champ is by far the most aimless. It requires an investment, regularly, of 2 turns to set up, 1 to pitch with Hermes, and at least 1 more to have a Cockatoodle hit the underworld, whether it be from casting normally and getting sacked, or pitching it with Hermes the next turn. The main issue with this is that unlike all of the other Hermes techs we've mentioned thus far, this is an extremely delayed payoff, and one that isn't even particularly great, as the Dracodoodle Champ, once all suppressions are done for the turn, is a 6, which is still a decent decent stat, but not insurmountable for all of the investment that you put in. Add to that the ability to set up takes your full Hermes, meaning no room for trickery lines, and it all just sort of falls apart. If you're going to play a Hermes brew, stay away from the doodles. Lastly is Exaltair. While I do think the card itself has merit, being a 6 in a deck that always wants Hermes up anyways, there are more proactive 5s that can occupy the space it would take up and be better off for it. Still, it is worth a consideration if your deck is lacking big bodies on 1-drops. And that about wraps it up for Hermes in Firestorm format. All in all, between Hermes and Hestia, Hermes has definitely come out on top as the new divine of choice for many players, with various directions you can take his toolbox. We may need to revisit him come livestream, as some of his toolkit will probably change in the time frame between now and Kissimmee, but even still, it's one of the most fun toolkits I've played with in this block, and I encourage you all to give him a try too. I give Hermes my dissection rating of 3 out of 5. He definitely has some room to grow in terms of meta viability, but you can't deny the tools that he has right now are both intensely interesting and extremely fun, and I can't wait to see what he's got in store down the road. That does it for this episode of Dissecting Divines. Be sure to let us know what you thought of it down in the comments below, and let me know what divine you want to see here next. I'd like to make this a regularly occurring show for the channel, so any and all feedback is welcome and encouraged. Until next time, this has been Law, reminding you that not all divines are equal, but they all can do something fun given the chance. Take care.